afforded the opportunity, thank you. In being afforded the opportunity to tell people's stories, I have found both my personal purpose and a passion for what lies ahead for us as a nation, and I feel incredibly privileged to have this opportunity to carry their voices into the chamber with me today. In early 2020, like so many of my fellow citizens, my workplace shut down, and shortly thereafter, I was locked down at home. I was terrified of COVID. As a child with severe asthma, I suffered bouts of pneumonia that further weakened my respiratory system, and as an adult, what might present as a seasonal cold for my coworkers has quickly turned into bouts of bronchitis that have sent me to the hospital for emergency breathing treatments. Even with the unearned privilege of my less at-risk group, one with better racial outcomes, and with my financial ability to access quality health care, I wondered if I would be one of the young Americans to suffer severe complications or carry a deadly virus home to my family. I was inspired by the urgency with which the global health community mobilized to sequence the virus, develop a vaccine, all thanks to decades of prior research on coronaviruses. Researchers around the world collaborated like never before in response to the greatest public health threat of our lifetime. So I jumped at my chance to get the vaccine the moment I was able to protect myself and my parents, my coworkers and friends, families. I jumped at the opportunity to take my best friend to get her mRNA vaccine. She was 5 months pregnant at the time and has a clotting disorder, and that made her cautious about receiving a vaccine, but being acutely aware of what contracting COVID could mean for her and her baby, she too jumped at the chance to protect them both once experts confirmed the vaccine's safety for pregnant women. I drove us home with tears in my eyes that day. To be honest, I also cried the day my parents received their second mRNA vaccine, because for me, vaccines represent love. My grandfather was a United States Navy man. I have his tags on the desk with me today. And he used to tell stories about polio. My mother, too, remembers the relief when her family stood in line for that vaccines. Vaccines are acts of love made possible by innovation. And I believe that in innovation, we have historically seen the best of America. That is where we are exceptional. From skyscrapers to airplanes eventually landing on the moon, we are innovators. And the COVID vaccine, in my opinion, is our generation's shot at a moon landing. This is a step for humankind made possible by science. Two of the largest groups of unvaccinated people exist in communities you've mentioned, communities of color and rural populations. There have been concerted disinformation and misinformation campaigns to discourage communities, including these, from vaccinating themselves against COVID-19. We cannot allow people dubbed a threat to this nation by our own intelligence agencies, no matter if they are anonymous internet marauders or members of our own governing body, to peddle disinformation that keeps us from protecting ourselves and others. Those are harmful stories. And medicine is not partisan. Science is not partisan. Public health must be supported to the best of our nation's ability, all of us, by nonpartisan political will. It is on us to remind our loved ones that this pandemic is not over. New variants, as you mentioned, including the more transmissible Delta variant, are circulating at an alarming rate. And even before the proliferation of these variants, experts were anticipating a fourth wave in areas with low vaccination rates. We were warned just this week that we could see dense outbreaks in rural areas because not enough of those communities are vaccinated. And on the subject of community inequity, as the chairman mentioned, Black and brown communities have suffered unspeakable losses through this pandemic, and it should come as no surprise to us that some people of color who felt abandoned by our government in 2020 may have hesitated to believe that the government would protect them now against COVID-19. We must collectively come to terms with our history of medical trauma and the abuse on Black and brown Americans, and we must provide culturally competent, evidence-based messaging that is community-specific if we want to prevent more devastation this fall. We need to spread the word about where people can find more information about the vaccines. My dear friend and science communication lead for the COVID tracking project, Jessica Malati Rivera, likes to say that science isn't finished until it's been communicated with empathy. So we must work to make sure that our policies and the stories we tell about them, the ways in which we communicate the science, are trustworthy, transparent, and inclusive. Public health must be our #1 priority, because by nature, public health requires us to work on behalf of the public. Our doctors and researchers do, and each of us can do the same by standing up for our communities and getting vaccinated to stop the spread. My fellow millennials watching and the innovative Gen Zers out there, we are looking to you. You can reclaim your academic institutions and your precious milestones in person by getting vaccinated to protect yourselves and your loved ones so that you can write the stories of your futures. I genuinely believe that together we can do this. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Bush. And